Sweeping landscapes, towering mountains, over 100,000 glaciers, 44,000 miles of coastline and intertidal waters. Far up in the most northwestern corner of North America is Alaska. At the top of the 25,000-mile Pacific Ring of Fire is a vast land of extremes. Our state is 1/5 the size of the lower 48. The tallest mountain in North America, rising 20,300 feet, is Denali, also known as Mount McKinley. Volcanic eruptions continue to form the growing Aleutian Islands. Earthquakes rattle the land and sea. The results are devastating. This most northern state has many boundaries. To the north, the Arctic Ocean and Beaufort Sea. To the east, Canada's Yukon Territory and province of British Columbia. To the south, the Gulf of Alaska and Pacific Ocean. And to the west, the Bering Sea, Bering Strait, and Chukchi Sea. Alaska is covered with lakes and rivers. The Yukon is the third largest river in the United States. At 1,980 miles, it begins its journey in Canada and cuts its wide meandering path through the center of the state, where it drains into a sprawling delta on the shores of the Bering Sea. Whether fresh or salt, our waters are the basis for so much that is important to all Alaskans, to the nation, and the world. For thousands of years, the rivers and oceans have provided us with the means of transportation, and it has been an important source from which we get our food. About 3/4 of the state's population lives in our coastal communities. Half of the entire shallow continental shelf is located off of our coasts. This shelf was once exposed and considered to be a land bridge, allowing Alaska's first inhabitants to migrate to this land. These are the people who became known as the Inupiaq and the Yupik Eskimos, Athabaskan, Aleuts, Alutiiq, Eyak, Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian. The first Europeans came from Russia. Vitus Bering, a Danish explorer, is credited with the first visit. He and his crew, which included the naturalist George Steller, crossed the sea, later named for Bering, in 1728. They got as far as Cape St. Elias, in what is now called the Gulf of Alaska. In 1799, the Russian-American Company was formed to hunt sea otters for their fur. Later, the northern fur seal, too. Despite initial abundance of these animals, they were hunted to near extinction. In 1848, another hunter arrived, only this time from the east. New England whalers. The whalers were effective harvesters. They killed whales without regard to overhunting. Consequently, the populations of whales in Alaskan waters was also dramatically reduced. On April 9, 1867, the United States purchased Alaska from Russia. At the time of the purchase, U.S. citizens thought Alaska was a useless wasteland and a bad investment. But that opinion was soon proven wrong. The year was 1880. Gold was discovered near the community of Juneau. But it was the Klondike Strike in 1896 that brought a stampede of mostly Americans to the north. The Klondike was followed by more large discoveries of gold in Nome and then in Fairbanks. While throughout the 20th century, many industries came and went, and would come and go, fish had been, and continued to be, an important renewable resource for Alaskans. Long before the first Europeans' arrival, Alaska natives relied on fish as a barter commodity. When the Russians arrived, they provided them with salmon, halibut, and cod. Soon the Russians set up fish plants to salt the fish, mostly for their own people. Meanwhile, fish canneries developing in California were moving north to Alaska. By the end of the 19th century, fish traps and canneries were found all along the lengthy Alaska coast. The canneries were owned by businesses outside of the territory. Concerns over salmon conservation became one of the issues that pushed Alaska towards statehood. Harvesting animals and plants from the sea for Alaska natives is a traditional activity. The modern-day term for this important practice is subsistence. Subsistence is gathering food. Alaska natives and other rural Alaskans subsist on fish, shellfish, and marine plants at a rate of up to 600 pounds per person per year.
About 50 to 100 kings. Depends on if we got any left over for the winter or not. If we don't have any left over for winter from the summer before, or if we didn't use any very much during the winter, we just catch so much and strip and brine them and smoke them.
We cut it up and dip it in salt water so they'll be open. We cut one side and go on the other. We cut it the gamach. When we have, when it's half raw, but it's smoked, and we just boil it in hot water. We eat it with seal oil. It's tasty. Then the rest we dry for dry fish and put them away in the buckets.
But subsistence is more than just gathering food. It is the cornerstone of what it means to be an Alaska Native, and is expressed and celebrated throughout the cultures. Alaskans are diverse. The distance between our communities is vast. Travel can be expensive, time-consuming, and sometimes hazardous. Expenses are high in rural Alaska. Economies can be precarious. Marine resources are important to Alaskans, and fish are the basis for the culture, food, and economic security. Rising and falling prices and fish populations have a dramatic effect on Alaska's communities. So while coastal Alaskans search for ways to create a more diverse economy, the long-established commercial fishing industry continues to be the economic base. In 1968, oil reserves were discovered on Alaska's northern coast at Prudhoe Bay. In 1977, the 800-mile-long Alaska pipeline was completed, and the North Slope oil was pumped through the pipeline from the Arctic to the ice-free port of Valdez in Prince William Sound. The oil industry is important to Alaska, as it provides jobs and large revenues to the state. Tourism and commercial fishing provide many jobs. Alaska's commercial fishing industry represents 50% of the total seafood production in the United States. From Kotzebue to Ketchikan, Around 50,000 people are employed in the fishing business, representing roughly a $1 billion industry. It is the second largest private employer in the state and one of the most dangerous occupations in the United States. Alaska has one of the highest drowning rates for boaters in the nation. Almost every Alaskan community has felt the loss of family and friends involved in the commercial fisheries. The water and climate are cold, and the weather can be harsh and difficult to predict. If trouble develops on the water, help is generally far away. It is a pristine and vast land, carefully managed, that allows these opportunities to continue to occur in Alaska. The U.S. Oceans Commission recognized Alaska's fisheries as the best managed in the United States. The North Pacific Fisheries Management Council is a model of how to oversee the management of many fisheries. Healthy fishery resources are important to every Alaskan. Ecosystem approaches to fishery harvest management, balanced with conservation of Alaska's living resources, are of vital importance to this state. The profitability and the viability of Alaska's commercial fishermen and fishing communities is a primary interest to all who live here. Concern over the health of wild salmon stocks resulted in a prohibition on fish farming in Alaska. However, other coastal aquaculture is being conducted in several areas of the state. Oysters are the primary commercial mariculture activity, but several other types of shellfish, such as little neck clams and gooey ducks, are also being developed.
Well, it's always been our vision to generate small-scale family operations. The majority of our income in the community comes from commercial fishing. Much of the industry we have comes from our resources, and there's been a lot of interest in developing side businesses for commercial fishermen and for their families.
In this location here at Canoe Lagoon, we have plants of gooey duck clams and little neck clams, and we're here to evaluate the first year and a half growth. And we've dug some clams, we'll measure them, get an idea of how well they're growing, and also get an idea of survival.
The tourist industry is also dependent on healthy ecosystems. Tourism is one of the largest private industries in the state. Each year, the number of people visiting Alaska on cruise ships far outnumbers the population of people living here. And sport fishing generates thousands of jobs and millions in wages and salaries for Alaskans each year. And due to the fact that Alaska's seas and coasts are so untouched and wild, the number of people interested in this sort of experience is also growing. Alaska is unique. 100 million acres of national park and refuge lands. 16,000 square miles covered with glaciers. 35-foot tides in Turnagain Arm, the second largest tides in North America. 3.5 million lakes of 20 acres or larger. Its vastness and relatively small population permit it to remain wild, pristine, and rich in natural resources. Wildlife is abundant. Mammals, birds, and fish all thrive here, where there is room to live. But Alaska is not without her challenges. Marine ecosystems and habitats can easily be disrupted by human activities. Once pristine, Alaska's beaches can become depositories for floating garbage. And cause problems for the plants and animals that live there. Underwater coral beds are being destroyed. The northern fur seal populations have been declining at a rate of 5% per year. They are currently on the critical species list. Sea otter populations are declining in the Aleutians, but booming in southeast Alaska, where the increased populations are eating and decimating the animals critical to some commercial fisheries in the area. Stellar sea lions have been on the threatened list in eastern Alaska, and in the western areas on the endangered list for many years. Scientists have spent a great deal of time studying this animal. Short-tailed albatross were near extinction in the 1950s, but are very slowly recovering. Scientists and fishermen have worked together to minimize the impact of fishing on these slow-to-reproduce and rare birds. Marine mammals, seabirds, and fish are vulnerable to human and environmental changes. Climate change is affecting Alaska, and the results, if not addressed, will be devastating to local economies. Erosion is destroying villages, and a change in plankton blooms could cause major changes in the marine animal and plant populations that are so important to our economy. Protection of our resources, making good decisions.
Because Ketchikan is a rainforest, we average 220 days of rain per year, and we measure it in feet. We get about 13.5 feet of rain a year.
Reaching out to Alaskans with science and good information is important to Alaska's welfare.
The biggest part of this tour is to not find the green crab, so we're rocking it out right now. But now we got these fish, and we're gonna need 3 pictures of them.
Collaboration between Western scientists and resource managers with local and traditional knowledge possessed by Alaska natives and other rural people is helping bridge gaps and creating a greater understanding of our seas and coasts.
Look, there's 2 of them. One on the top there, too. Oh! They're eating a smaller one. Hey. Oh, what's that?
Improved literacy about the ocean will take Alaskans closer to understanding how to protect and use our resources wisely.
They very well could be thrilled.
Alaska is a strong and vital state. There are many challenges and opportunities. Alaska Sea Grant has communicated with constituents to identify issues. We have developed a long-range strategy to address these issues. We receive guidance through community meetings, statewide surveys, interaction with local state and federal agencies and leaders, and input from our advisory committee, faculty, staff, and students at the University of Alaska. Alaska Sea Grant. We address the challenges and produce significant results for the state, nation, and the international community.